I think step one, it's like, when you have an addiction problem or any kind of issue, it's like, always say step one is recognizing you have a problem. I think step one was saying it's okay to fail. It's okay to, be in the situation, which is hard to convince yourself of that. I think step two was not giving up on hey, I'm good at this. I've done this for a long time. I obviously like the business, and not saying, hey, F this, I don't want to do this anymore. I think it's a pretty easy knee-jerk reaction to say that, right? And then step three was kind of really whiteboarding in your head, what went wrong and what went right and how we're going to fix it and what we're not going to do. And, setting up new rules for yourself and new SOPs for yourself, right? How you're going to do stuff. And then, again, not to undersell it, fitness and getting that part of my life again was big because it really wasn't for 5, 6, 7 years. And during COVID, I would just go walk for an hour a day, 2 hours a day. And you don't realize the endorphins and how it helps. And you just feel a little better, right? But I think once I realized it was okay to fail and it was okay to fall off the horse and get back on, and not everyone's story is a straight line business wise. And once you own all that, you get in a much better headset than oh my God, I'm in my twin bed at home. You start realizing okay, we'll get back to where you want to be. I think you just got to have that mentality.
Welcome back to another episode of the Mile 40 podcast. Thank you all for continuing to tune in, week out. I'm really appreciative of every single one of you. If you haven't already, I have a discount code in the show notes for Audacious. I want to thank you all for your support since the book launch. It's been doing great. And honestly, it wouldn't have been nearly as successful if it wasn't for you all, the listeners. If you haven't already, be sure to hit subscribe or follow, whether you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you may be. Be sure to drop a review. 5 stars helps us go a long way with regards to continuing to build the show. Today's guest is Matt Shendell. Matt is the founder of the Page Group. Now, if you've been in the New York City area, if you've gone out in the Hamptons, you've definitely been to one of his establishments. Matt and I have definitely crossed paths over the last several of years, most recently through the fitness circuit. And I'm glad that I approached you, Matt, and asked you to come on. I'm really excited about today's episode. So first and foremost, thank you for joining me.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm a big fan, and I was really excited when you approached me, and I couldn't wait to do this. So I'm happy to be here, my man.
Of course. So let's just give the audience just some quick background here with regards to where you grew up, where you're from, and how you got your foot started in this industry, right? You've been in this industry now for a couple of decades. And so, yeah, I know it's crazy to say. It's crazy to say. I mean, I've been going to your establishments for what feels like decades now. So, it's crazy to think about that. So why don't you just give us that quick background, and then we'll dig into the story a little further.
Sure. Grew up in Queens, New York, a native New Yorker. My family still lives there, so I've been in New York basically my whole life. Went to University of Delaware for college. Was kind of tinkering around with a law degree, law direction, law school. Pivoted in 1997, and opened our first bar called China White. And it was like a let's get the bar business out of our system kind of project, right? Let's do one place and with a couple of friends and see how it goes. And it really took off. And here we are 26 years later. We've had 21 venues, and some of them great, some of them not so great. The two that stand out from a notoriety standpoint is we owned Dune in Southampton. We partners with the Tao Group guys, Noah and Jay, and shout out to them because they're killing it and big fans of those guys. I've been friends with those guys for 30 years. And then we opened up Ainsworth, our sports brand, in 2009. And that really gave us a big, footprint in the nightlife and restaurant business. And that was a rocket ship. We grew that brand to 8 of them nationwide. And, it's still going. There's still a few left, and 16-year-old brands. So 16 years in New York City or in any market is a long time for a brand, especially in this industry. So we're pretty proud of that. But Dune and Ainsworth are the two most, the high notoriety brands we've had. But it's been 26 years, and some of it's been pretty great, some of it's been pretty not so great. But here we are. But it's been fun. Now I do more local mom and pops. I live in Brooklyn. I have a donut shop called Brandon's Donuts, named after my son. A small restaurant cafe called Luana's Tavern. It's on 4th Street in Brooklyn. Some other stuff in Brooklyn we're doing. So I try to keep it local and more passion stuff, but that's where we're at right now. But it's been 26 years of different brands, different stuff, and Ainsworth being the flagship pretty much.
I love that. I love that. Both establishments I spent a good amount of time in. I remember I graduated college in 2009, moved to the city, and everybody was going to the Ainsworth at the time, and so definitely caught a bunch of games over there. I want to go back to the very first spot. You were pretty young.
I
How
was
did you get?
22.
You were 22 years old.
Mm-hmm.
You know, let's
22.
walk the listeners through this really quick. How did you fork up the funds to get a place started? And you know, what was the overall business strategy there? Right, going from that place to 21 venues
Right.
after that. Was that always the vision to kind of build a bigger brand, or did it just kind of naturally flow from there?
I think it naturally flowed. We didn't really have a vision. It was me and my original partner was this guy named Dave Hyman, who we were briefly working together in real estate. And I said, "Hey, I want to open a bar." And he said, "I want to open a bar too." And we just decided to go open up a bar. This is 97, where 90% less places in New York to go to. The hotel, bar craze hasn't happened. Rents were 100% less than what they are now, right? So, I think we just maxed out a bunch of credit cards and took a bunch of crappy bank loans and stapled some curtains to the wall and found a spot and a cheap rent, and we just winged it. But I had been doing doors and bartending, and I had some nightlife connects for a while at that age, and I was in that promoting when I was in high school, and blah blah blah. So I had a little nightlife connect and nightlife juice. When we opened up, we did really well. We had some celebs in there, and it just was let's give this a whirl, and if not, I'm going to go to law school kind of thing. And then it just took off. So, but we kind of slapped the funding together. It was not a let's do a deck and do a capital raise or whatever that people do frequently now. It was more of a let's get some credit cards and some curtains from Bed Bath and Beyond and staple them up and see if we can make it work.
So let me ask you a question. When you're young and you start a business like that and you start to see success, what runs through your head? And does that success kind of get addicting because, you start to see what you're capable of and you start to want more of that?
Well, I think especially back then in the bar business, it was a different business. Costs were excessively less than they are now. The cost of everything was less. It was a much easier business to make money. And I think when I grew up in, middle class Queens, I had a great upbringing, but, just when you start seeing those types of revenue numbers and money coming in, and it's fun, and you're 22 and it's easy, and it's wow, you start thinking, let's do another one and let's do another one. And I think it's a good thing if you're an entrepreneur to have that DNA and that drive and that engine to do more, but it's also a curse, because doing more along the way has bit me in the ass, excuse my language, and it's bit me where, we've probably done too much, and I've undercapitalized projects and done things the wrong way a lot. So, I think at 22, listen, at that point, I was at the place every night. I was having the time of my life. It was great. So it wasn't really work, right? And then the cherry on top was every week we had, we were making great money. So it just turned into this this is great. What could be better than this? And we just kept rolling with it. But, looking back, I wish I can go back to 22-year-old Matt and say, hey, don't do that extra venue and put some more aside and grow this business and focus here. 2 years at one spot doing well doesn't make it a success. It was always okay, we did well for a year. Let's go do something else.
You kind of took the question right out of my mouth, because usually this was a question that I'd leave for the end of the episode. And I would have said, Matt, what would you go back and tell 22-year-old self, and what kind of advice would you give him? But because I know where this story is going, I kind of wanted to ask you right now, and you answered it for me directly. I wanted to say, what would you go back and tell the 22-year-old version of you? And so you kick off over there. Things are going well. You're probably thriving for someone in his young 20s, probably living the life. And walk us through how you went from the first restaurant to the next place, the first venue to the next place, just so we understand, where the growth happened.
I wish it was more elaborate. We just did really well for 2 years at our first place and said, this is, easy and fun, and, young friends group. We had a group of friends that were young, and we had a good network of people, and it was, constant birthday parties and flow, and people wanted to come by, and we just thought, we have enough demand for another spot. And again, doing a place back then was so much easier from a capital standpoint, from a rent standpoint, from a liquor license standpoint, from an everything standpoint. So it wasn't it's super arduous now. It's a super heavy lift to open a place anywhere, especially in New York City. It just wasn't that hard. So we just said, let's do another one. And we're a victim of our own success. So we just kept, everything we did was rolling and moving. So it wasn't, we didn't really have any speed bumps in the beginning, which I kind of wish we had some, right? Like to slow us down a little bit. But, at the end of the day, it was just an easier industry to be in, and it was just an easier climate to open up businesses, and landlords were in a different position. And we kind of fell into the next place, right? Like, let's do another place. And went from there.
So remind me, where geographically was the first place? In New York?
It was on 31st and Madison.
31st and Madison.
Which back then, I mean, it's not a good nightlife location now, right? But like back then, you could like roll a bowling ball down the street and you wouldn't hit anybody. Then we ended up going to the East Village next at a place called Shampoo, which is on the corner of A and Houston, which has been been many different brands since then. And then we just, again, back then too, being young and going out every night and having like a big social following, a big social circle, I didn't really care about location, because in my mind, like, my friends and the people that are in our circle and our following were going to come to wherever we were, right? So like, it was like, let's find a good rent, which was pretty easy back then. Let's find a good space. We always went for second generation pre-built space, like a space that, had failed previously. And we just kind of popped around to the next, like, good deal.
Let's talk about when the first business speed bump came about. We're going to talk business and we're going to talk about your personal life. But I want to first hit the business speed bump and when that first came about, because clearly if you're someone listening to this podcast and you've been to these venues, you're thinking to yourself, these guys had a formula, because it was like routine in our heads. Like, if I'm out in the Hamptons, I'm going to June, and if I'm in Manhattan, I'm going to the Ainsworth. Like, there was no even thinking, there was no fighting it. And so we were wired.
We had you hooked.
Yeah, you had us hooked. If we were 20 something, we wanted to go out, hang with a certain crowd, be around certain people. The thought was, I might run into someone famous if I go to the Ainsworth. I remember one time going to the Ainsworth. There's a big Knicks game on, and Larry Johnson was there. And I remember thinking like that was the coolest thing in my young 20s. So let's just first hit, when was that first business speed bump?
The first speed bump really didn't happen until about 16 or 17. We had a couple Ainsworths. I don't remember how many, but we had a few that were doing really well, and we were like a really hot brand. And we started getting approached by people saying, you can be the next Buffalo Wild Wings, or you can, go private equity, go investment bank, grow the brands. And, I think, at the time I was getting married, I was moving out of the city, I was building a house. So I was doing a lot of things on the personal level. And I think the first speed bump was, we really had this cloak of invincibility for a while. I mean, we opened up, at one point we had 3 Ainsworths in Manhattan, 6 blocks from each other. And they were all doing great. So it was like, we just put some wood and some TVs up and anybody would love, it just worked, right? Now, I think watching the game at a bar, or every bar shows the game, it's like, it's like we were the first place to think that made it an upscale experience to watch a game. But now I think that's common. Like places are nicer now, right? Like, I think places always have TVs, and people go to watch games at places that you wouldn't even think had TVs. So I think it's just a common, and sports is like universal now. 20 years ago, sports was like a guy thing, or it was like a sports bar. And like, it was, now it's a social thing. We had more females than males at Ainsworth for a very long time, which I'm sure, you recognize while you were going there all the time. Right. But, first speed bump came about 16, 17. We had all these spots. We were doing really well. I think I got distracted with my personal stuff, and I started like not coming in as much. And I was like, hey, I can move out of the city and this will be fine. And we decided to expand nationally, which, probably not the best time to like take your foot off the gas from a focus standpoint when you're trying to expand nationally. So we had a couple big capital raises that fell through. We engaged an investment bank, and they wanted us to show proof of concept out of New York. So we signed leases in Nashville and Kansas City. And, we didn't capitalize it right. We had a couple, I don't want to mention particular names. We had some celebrities that were going to invest, and that fell through. And, you can Google it, paychecks. There's a bunch of stuff in there about that. But, we had a lot of stuff that was like at the 1 yard line, and it just didn't work, and then at that point, instead of saying, hey, let's pump the brakes and like recalibrate and get the capital correct and do things correctly, I think we just forged ahead because we had always forged ahead and just things just always worked. And we opened up all these venues and we didn't have the capital. And, on a personal level, I ended up going through a divorce and I built a house up in Westchester and then I sold the house. And it was like, it was a lot of stuff that just started all falling apart at the same time. I ended up trying to sell the company to Ainsworth and that deal was a mess. That was like 18 and 19. And then in 20, we undid the sale of the company and we like got the company back. And then 2 weeks later, COVID hit. Literally. So like we got the company back like February, like 25th of 20. And like, it was like, be careful what you wish for. You don't want it anymore. Like I just, it was kind of like bittersweet. So, I think just over expanding and like mixing that with like personally saying, hey, I don't need to like focus as much and I can like go live an hour away and do whatever, like wasn't the best formula. But, again, if I can give any advice to like my kids or anyone who's like trying to be an entrepreneur and grow a business, it's like, have a great runway of capital and have the best, capital plan and have investors locked up. Like we were used to just doing things and things worked out. We would sign leases before we had the capital and then go raise the money. We're like, and we had the same like 10, 15 guys that would always invest. And it was like, it wasn't really a thing. Then you start talking about like, you're raising $100,000 for a little bar versus raising 10 million or 20 million for like a national expansion. It just became obviously a bigger ball of wax. And again, not to mention Angela, we had a couple celebrities that committed that backed out, and we had a couple deals that, fell through, and we really just kind of just said, hey, let's sign these leases, let's grow to 8, because it'll work out, and somebody will figure it out, or we'll just earn our way out of this. And I ended up, but I think a lot of my personal stuff just kind of, wore me down, where I said I just want to sell and get out, and I sold, and the deal didn't go through, and then I got it back, and then COVID hit, and like. Here we are. So that's pretty much the speed bump story.
Yeah. So let's unpack that a little bit because, you said a lot there. And it's a lot to imagine. And I want to kind of go into what was going inside your head because I have to imagine at one point you felt like you were on a high of a lifetime, right? Especially in the nightlife scene when things were thriving, and things were moving along well. I can only speak for myself, but if I was doing what you were doing at your age, I would have been on a high of a roller coaster. And then I have to imagine at one point when things start to go sour, I don't know if it's my ego. I don't know if it's my reputation. But at one point, I start to kind of wonder about, well, which one am I? Am I the guy who is thriving at the top of the industry? Or am I this guy who's, kind of now handling all these things falling apart at once in my personal life and in my business life? Like, which one am I?
Right.
And I think one of the things that
I've been there.
I think one of the things that speaks to your strength and fortitude is that you're still here. And that speaks to your strength, and that speaks to who you are on the inside. But for the listeners out there, I want to kind of walk them through, what you went through internally as you kind of battled all that. And, we didn't really touch too much into the divorce. And, I want to be respectful of how much you might want to touch on that, but maybe even giving us some background in terms of where you met your ex-wife and how that kind of went in parallel with the businesses.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to go too much into that. Just, I would say that, to your comment about still being here, having 2 kids helps, right? Yeah. Like, not to get too morbid, but like, when you're having those dark moments and you're like, what the hell happened? Like, I went from living in a mansion in Bronxville to sleeping in my bed in my house I grew up with in Queens, my twin bed in my room. So that's the most humbling morning you can have. And you wake up and you're back in your little bed you grew up in, right? And you're 45 years old with 2 kids. I think, just having the fortitude, you got to get in a take it day by day mindset. And that's not a cliche. You really have to just take it in, like, let me wake up and tackle today's crap and then go back to sleep and then wake up and you got to daisy chain days together, right? I think not having like a good personal situation didn't help the business stuff, but I don't blame what happened in business on the personal stuff. I think just when nothing's flowing right, it's hard. You have nothing to lean on, right? Like, if you're killing it in business and your personal stuff's bumpy, you can kind of say, well, you know what? Like, I'm making a lot of money, I'm killing it, and I'll just be in the office till midnight every night. And some people bury themselves in their work, right? I couldn't bury myself in my work. I couldn't bury myself in my personal stuff. So I just kind of tried to make it day to day. And like, for as far as the internal strife, like you really just got to get in that mindset of like, okay, wake up. What's the nightmares of the day? Fight through it. Right. Like what, and I think also this may sound sad or weird, but it's the truth. Like, I think if you wake up in the morning expecting to like have disasters and nightmares and grenades go off, it was a better way to attack the day than waking up being like, oh my God, I can't believe this, this is happening. I woke up every day saying, okay, today's going to suck, but I'm going to figure out like how to, put out the fires and get to the next day. And you just kind of daisy chain together. But yeah, the internal strife was like, wow, I went from, having everything I thought I wanted to like literally waking up in my twin bed in Queens with like my comic books in the fucking wall still and stuff. You know what I mean? My baseball cards in the closet. So it's humbling. And I think, I have a great family, so that really helped me, and I think I have some great friends that supported me and said, hey, everyone has ups and downs. You did some epic shit, like you'll figure it out. I had some friends that disappeared too, which I'm sure I don't know the details of what you went through actually, but I'm sure you found like, sometimes you're really taking inventory of like who your friends are when you go through a lot of bad stuff,
Absolutely.
I see this Instagram post or reel or story all the time. I don't know what it is. Someone writes, like, don't call somebody, don't call anybody for 6 months and see who calls you. Right. Like those, and see who checks in with you. So like, when you're going through a lot of stuff and you really want to see like who's checking in on you and who's coming to see you and like, hey, all bullshit aside, are you okay? Like that kind of stuff. Like then you really realize who your real friends are and stuff. So, but I think getting through the day and daisy chaining it together and being diligent and saying, hey, like, listen, again, having 2 kids is my motivation helped a lot. And, being a victim of our own success was a problem. Like not from 97 to 2016, not having any issues. And then all of a sudden having momentous amount of issues is like, it's difficult. I would much rather have had like more challenges along the way. And I made a lot of mistakes, which, I own up to, but you learn, and people say you got to learn from your mistakes. It's not a cliche. You really got to look back and say, what did I do wrong? I'm not going to do it again and try to fix it. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're spot on. And you did it again. You brought up my next question before I brought up myself. So I love where your head is at, because my next question was going to be around the people that you've surrounded yourself by along the way. And again, I have to, I'm just putting myself in your shoes, man. I can't help because of your journey, right? Like if I am riding high in my 20s, on the top of the hospitality scene at the hottest names in town, I'm probably surrounded by a lot of people. And I don't really know who has my best interest at heart, but I'm probably blinded by a little bit of the success at the same time. And I'm not really thinking about that. And then to your point, when things come crashing down a little bit, you start to look around and see who's there. And I also call this out because when you and I met, you and I had met at Mayweather, and the circle of people that I had known there was an incredible group of people. And so one of the things that kind of stood out to me was, I don't really know Matt too well, but I know he's around good people. And I don't know if that was always the case or if that's something that, has taken more and more form as you've gone through some of your adversity.
Well, I was, obviously when you're going through a lot of stuff, your physical health takes a toll. So like, I went from being super fit and I got really out of shape, and, I linked up with a guy, Evan Betts, who, right? Evan's like one of the best humans out there.
He's amazing.
Yeah. And it's funny because during COVID, I was like, you know what? Like, I got these restaurants back. I don't want them back. And now it's COVID. This sucks. I'm going to get in shape. And I was hitting up Evan every day, like on Instagram. And, he's backflipping and doing whatever he's doing all over the place. And I'm like, it took him forever to get back to me. And I was like, come on, man. Like, my name's Matt. I wanted you to train me. And finally one day he was like, cool. And we met up in like early of 21. And we started training, and like, now we're like best friends. And as he's the best. And like we, I really got, fitness is important when you're going through that stuff, right? Like it really keeps you sane. So I think I started surrounding myself by more guys like that, and more like, a lot of the fitness industry has a lot of positive minded, good energy people. And I think not that the restaurant industry doesn't, but the restaurant industry, what are you doing in the restaurant industry? You're getting people drinking, they're partying, there's good stuff, there's bad stuff. Fitness industry has mostly good stuff, right? It's people feeling good and good vibes. I met you at the class we were at Mayweather Tribeca. Quick plug. Was like good energy, and like, I started really, I never was in that world. like even when I was fit, I was always did it like at home or like I'm big on boxing. I would hit the bag by myself. Like I never was a group fitness guy. So when I started realizing like, wow, like group fitness has like the people have the energy and like it's a good way to go and clear your head for an hour. Like I started, um, just gravitating towards that. So Evan and a lot of, fitness guys, James from Tone House and a lot of these guys that are just great people and, Julian and like all these guys that, just really like, are always like their energy is just great. Like I really started trying myself with people like that. Happy birthday, Julian, by the way. And I just realized that there's another, I was so not even neck deep, like eyeball deep in the restaurant nightlife world that like I didn't really ever really surround myself by people that weren't in nightlife, not on purpose, but you just get immersed in it. Right. And I was just always meeting with a nightlife person or going to dinner with nightlife people or at a spot and doing business. And then you start realizing there's like, there's other energies out there. So I think I just really focused on that. So, and that helped a lot and, got back in shape, thank God. And just started doing other stuff. So I think that was surrounding myself by different people, different energies. It was a big help. Fitness industry, big help.
Absolutely. James has been on the show. So he's got an episode out there previously. I want to bring Evan on. Evan claims he doesn't have a good story to tell, but I doubt that. I'm sure somewhere in there he's got something to share with us.
I'll get Evan on. We'll get Evan on.
I love it. No, that's great. And I think it's a real testimony too. Again, I mean, the theme comes up a lot on this show around the power of community and the power of putting yourself around people who are going to lift you up daily, and not just to necessarily pump your tires, but to carry you when you need to reframe that mindset. And so that's a really good call out. Now, sticking on the theme of community, but also focusing in on, that period starting in 2017 or so. At what point did you start to kind of pick up the pieces? And if it meant just kind of taking care of yourself, whether it was physically or emotionally, whatever that may have been, what were some of the things that you did at first, right? Like you realized you were, like you said, back to your twin bed at home. You're looking around. So talk about like those initial steps of putting the pieces back together.
I think step one, it's like, when you have an addiction problem or any kind of issue, it's like, always say step one is recognizing you have a problem. I think step one was saying it's okay to fail. It's okay to, be in the situation, which is hard to convince yourself of that. I think step two was not giving up on like, hey, I'm good at this. I've done this for a long time. I obviously like the business, and like not saying, hey, F this, I don't want to do this anymore. I think it's a pretty easy knee-jerk reaction to say that, right? And then step three was kind of really whiteboarding in your head, like what went wrong and what went right and how we're going to fix it and what we're not going to do. And, setting up new rules for yourself and new SOPs for yourself, right? How you're going to do stuff. And then, again, like not to undersell it, like fitness and getting that part of my life again was big because it really wasn't for 5, 6, 7 years. And like, during COVID, I would just go walk for an hour a day, 2 hours a day. And like, you don't realize the endorphins and how it helps. And like, you just feel like a little better, right? But I think once I realized it was okay to fail and it was okay to like, fall off the horse and get back on. And like, not everyone's story is a straight line business wise. And once you like own all that, I think it's a good, you get in a much better headset than like, oh my God, I'm in my twin bed at home. Like you start realizing like, okay, we'll get back to where you want to be. I think you just got to like have that mentality.
Hey all, it's me, Bishoy. As a marathon runner and endurance athlete, I've come to understand the importance of properly fueling your body for preparation and recovery. Every day, you get a shot at success. How you start your day typically paints a picture of what the rest of the day will look like. Start your day with a super convenient, healthy, and delicious nutritional win. Meal 1 by Creatures of Habit. Overnight oatmeal packed with 30 grams of plant-based protein, chia, flax, and pumpkin seeds. Vitamin D3, omega-3s, a probiotic, and digestive enzymes made in under 1 minute. Stop wasting time or worrying about what to eat as your first meal of the day. Start with Meal 1. Visit creaturesofhabit.com, creatures spelled with a K, and use code MILE40 for 15% off a one-time purchase or the first subscription order payment. Yeah. No, yeah, I think you're spot on. And, as you were thinking about that, I'm thinking about a couple of my friends that, are entrepreneurs in their own right. Some of them looking to start up their own businesses, some of them in the process of opening up their businesses. Um, what advice do you have for people right now, given the current um, infrastructure or the current requirements, really, to build something here, specifically in the New York area? If you could do it all over again and start today instead of 22, maybe the question is, would you start something today, or would you
I mean,
walk
I
away
stick
right
to
now?
what I said before. It's like, make sure you capitalize things properly. Make sure you have a growth plan. You know, when you're doing your projections or doing your business model, putting it together, like, expect failure, expect, be conservative, really go into it with a humble mindset. Again, like us opening up 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 bars in a row or venues in a row that did great was great, but it also was like a false sense of like, we just fucking put a sign up and we go, like, it doesn't always work like that. Right. So, I think I would just you got to be careful. The business New York City is not a great place to own a business right now. Right. And it's not a brick and mortar business. If people ask me about New York, I kind of tell them, don't do it. We have an Ainsworth in Hoboken that does great, and Hoboken's a great community, and we have a great landlord, and we have a great rent, and we have great loyal customers and regulars. Like, just different than New York, and like other cities. Like, we had Ainsworth in Nashville for 7 years, which just closed. Nashville's a great city, thriving, hospitable people, great weather, cheap rent, like good stuff, like, I would tell people, don't do New York right now, but yeah, I just think capitalizing and planning for the worst to happen was something we weren't good at. We were just like, and if something bad happens, we'll just figure it out. We'll grab a credit card and we'll put it together, and and eventually that just bites you. So that's what advice I would give: is capitalize. Be careful with New York right now. Like we're in Brooklyn. Brooklyn's a better market than Manhattan, in my opinion, right now. I think, so just be wary of New York. Be wary of, like, what's going on with the Fed, interest rates, and things are a little crazy. And as far as my industry, as far as food and beverage and hospital, very few people are doing well still, right? Of course, on Instagram, and if you ask any restaurateur, they're always killing it. That's always their answer, right? So, but it's difficult in New York to make money in this business. I think COVID changed. When people say, "Oh, the restaurants haven't come back from COVID," I think people just changed their, like, expectations of, like, a lot of people don't mind staying home now. I think a lot of people don't mind cooking or ordering in. I think a lot of people are more money conscious than ever, right? Like going out and spending an exorbitant amount of money on food or bottles or whatever. Like, I think that's just becoming more people more, have sticker shock after COVID and stuff. So I would tell someone, just be careful in New York and make sure you raise the right capital, and don't just think it's going to be great. Plan for all the bad stuff.
Yeah. You also bring up a good point, and this has come up before. The alcohol topic has come up a lot on this show, and it's slipping my mind. But I did speak to a business owner not too long ago that has talked about the general decline in alcohol purchases, and like we all kind of see it across. A lot of the marketing that we're seeing these days, and there's a movement away from alcohol, and for various reasons. Can you speak to that as a business owner in terms of what you've seen on your end, just so we can get our story straight and hear it directly from someone who's a business owner?
I think the fitness business is bigger than ever, right? I think, like, going to brunch with 12 of your girlfriends and drinking all day and doing all that, which was huge in, like, 2000 to 2010. Like, the day drinking stuff started in, like, 2005, right? Ainsworth Sunday was like a day drinking brunch football party, right?
Yeah.
I think that has now changed to, like, let's go to SoulCycle and let's go to Barry's and let's do a workout class and let's do all. I mean,
yeah,
I think the fitness, which is great, right? Like, for people to be healthier, but I think I think getting drunk and doing all this stuff is less attractive now. And I think the fitness industry is obviously huge. And if on Instagram, you see, like, more than ever. And I think, Budweiser's, for numerous reasons, had, like, its worst 2 years ever. And, like, I think people are leaning more towards fitness and being more aware of, how unhealthy New Yorkers have been and Americans have been. And I think that has a lot to do with it. I don't think, again, I'm 49, I'll be 50 this year. I don't So I'm not the target market to like, focus group on drinking as much, but I don't think 25, 30-year-olds are drinking like they were when I was 25, 30.
I agree.
People do dinners, right? Like birthday party. When I was 25, a birthday party was get a bracelet, do an open bar, go to a bar, black out, get drunk. Now it's like, let's do a dinner. I have friends in college who call me and say my sister, their sister was 5, now was 22, wants to go to Carbone or wants to go here for dinner. I'm like, that's what these kids do, and they want to go to Catch. And like, it's just like that whole like drinking perception is not cool anymore.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's taken a dramatic shift, especially in the last, let's call it 5 years in particular. Yeah. But, I want to make sure that I point out to the listeners, like, again, this is someone who runs the businesses as opposed to someone coming on and preaching from a health and wellness perspective. Right. As much as health and wellness was a part of your journey, we're talking about actual numbers here. And I think it speaks to the overall shift in mindset for a lot of people, within these major cities. And so that's really helpful. Right. And I appreciate the context there. As we wrap things up here, I want to just thank you for, your vulnerability and for being upfront and honest with regards
Thanks for having me.
Of course, with regards to your journey, you talk about your kids a lot. And you talk about, the important role that they play for you and just kind of what they bring you. And I understand that as a father as well, with regards to when all is said and done. Look, I want my daughter to know what I've learned along the way. I don't want her to think that it was a smooth ride, and I don't want her to think that, life isn't going to come at you quick with, different hurdles, obstacles, moments of adversity, so on and so forth. And so you had mentioned some of the lessons, that you'd pass down to your kids. Is there anything in particular that you want to leave the audience with, based on what you've learned, and kind of talk to the audience the same way that perhaps you talk to your kids? If you had to kind of lay it all out there for them, based on what you've experienced over the last 20 years.
I would say, take time to prepare and don't just jump into an idea, really plan it out from a monetary standpoint, as I've said a couple times. Don't do business with your friends, because it usually ends up shitty. Unfortunately, try not to. If you have really good old close friends, I would just keep them in the friend zone and try not to, partner up with them. But, maybe sometimes it can work out, but it didn't in my case. I would say, being an entrepreneur sounds great and everyone loves it, and you go on Instagram and it's all these cool entrepreneur memes and sayings and like stuff, but it is a lifestyle, and it is consumes who you are financially, mentally, and physically. So like, make sure you're ready for that, and opening up a business is like having a kid, so I think I lost that too at some point, where I was opening up businesses and not treating them like an infant, like you do, my first couple of businesses, I was there 24/7, like treating it like a baby. And I think so be prepared to do that. You can't just open up, you can do a podcast, or you can do stuff online. You can do stuff that isn't like, 24/7, but you're opening a brick and mortar business or a real business where you're capitalizing things and doing stuff. Like, I think you need to really treat it like an infant and something that's needs to be nurtured and grown. And I think a lot of people skip over that because this day and age, like, opening a business is easy, right? You can just open an LLC, get an Instagram handle, and get going in like an hour, right? When I was 22, it didn't work like that. So I think, a lot of the younger generation today is like, yeah, I'm opening this and I started that. And I look at people's Instagram bios, they have 7 companies they own. And I'm like, I think it's just, if you're going to put time and energy and money into something, especially if it's your own capital, I've always used a lot of my own capital, which is a gift and a curse. So make sure you're very protective of it. And treat it like an infant and nurture it.
Awesome. Matt, thank you so much, man. Thanks for coming
on.
Brother. Thank you for
a pleasure, man.
Thank you for laying it out. We could learn a lot from this episode, and I'm grateful for you. And, welcome to the Mile 40 family, my friend.
Thank you. I hope to see you soon, brother.
You got it.
Thank you for everything. Congrats on your success, man.
Thank you.